is complete with autopilot, immersive audio, and back rubs. You will enjoy the most premium of vehicles at the cost that reflects this flexible customization. So this type is a fine-tuned CMS, which portrays elegance, performance, and budget. It requires the specifications of well-designed parts, and the results are stunning. So this is not something that you would toss a Yakima roof rack onto, for example. A second tier is sort of like a mid-size Honda, which you can upgrade the wheels, interior color and fabric, and customize it all the way down to the lug nuts. Who knew? You can choose your lug nut. With this CMS, you start with common templates like the 404 and the search results that we talked about. And welcome everyone who's joining us. And you can swap out each element. So this is a moderately lower tier investment than the Tesla, obviously. There are more options for customization, but the result is a combination of choices that make it uniquely yours. And you could also choose to include that roof rack if you'd really like. Third tier is this, you're in a hurry because the family car is out of commission, and to fix it will cost more than it's worth. So we've found a good car on the lot, and it has the right amount of amenities, and you could do worse than 4 brand new wheels. So this CMS type is a plug and play, like a prefab house, to borrow from another analogy. You can choose the font, text size, background images, and colors, but you are confined to a template structure that's available, which makes it quick to get up and running, and it's not too expensive. So using each of these examples, solution-specific customizations are where Earthling excels. We really enjoy projects where we get to partner and solve technical and visual problems. Some CMSs are just more challenging and require a heavier lift to get that roof rack on, but sometimes the rack doesn't fit. So there are probably more CMSs than there are cars. This is a scrolling list of current CMSs by market share. there won't be a quiz. And clearly there's no way that we or anyone could be an expert mechanic in all of these. So we're just going to talk about a few that we do have experience. So we culled that list down to these handful. So I'll talk about these in relation to our car analogies. So the Craft CMS is very malleable. We've used it to get our client sites to a Tesla level experience of elegance and fine-tuned precision. And then you'll see the market share goes to the Honda class website. WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal are in that space. These are popular open source platforms with lots of people working to keep them updated, secure, and continuously improved. And there's still a notion that WordPress is only for blogs and blogging platform, but it still powers it powers large websites like BBC America, Sony Music, and TechCrunch. For all of these, there are tons of plugins and services that are already integrated with the platforms, which means that Yakima or Thule roof rack will fit without having to buy an attachment converter. And then the Wix and Squarespace is sort of like a CMS as a service. And that's the least L-E-A-S-E-D, least car from the lot. So there's monthly fees that covers the cost of hosting and domain name ownership. Some plugins are extra that increase that monthly fee, but you can get this up and running in very short order. So some questions we hear or problems to overcome. And some of these CMSs will do better than others, obviously, but it depends on the specific problem to solve. One of them is, what is the best CMS for my budget? So what I would ask is, well, aside from your project budget, which we'll need to know in order to answer that question, what is your projected budget for hosting or ongoing maintenance, regular checkups, and oil changes? Another question we've gotten is, I'm not a developer. Am I going to be able to use the back end of the site to update content? Which one will be the easiest for me to use? So an administrator of your site is very closely almost more important than the front end user. Each of the solutions we saw on the previous slide do have varying degrees of usability when it comes to the admin area. But like the dashboard of a car, you'll learn where the volume and cruise controls are. And more importantly, the difference between the wipers and the blinkers. And sometimes we get someone who needed their site launched yesterday, which is, in the words of Fleetwood Mac, yesterday's gone. And it sounds like the driver of the project may have been an expat on a Midwestern winter road. So we're going to get control of the wheel and figure out the best way forward. Can I get this analogy any better? I don't think so. So now we're to the meat of the conversation, which is the questions that I want to hear from you all so that we can talk about your deal and what your problem is and how we can help solve that or talk about it. So candid conversation. Let's hear your questions. Erin.
Hi, I have a question.
Okay.
And my first question is, can folks take off of mute so that we can have a conversation? And if you feel comfortable taking off your or putting on your camera, I encourage you to do that as well, because this is a great opportunity to talk to these minds. So I have a little more insider information because I work with Becky and Luke. I'm Erin Courtney. I'm at Earthling Interactive as well. I'm the VP of Sales. But I still get confused about, like, is there a CMS that's really like the best? Is WordPress really the best? I hear about it all the time. But then I also hear like bad things about it. Like, it's not secure, it's not safe. Which one of those is right?
Well, it is my opinion that I lean towards WordPress because of the experience that I've had in making it more secure, solving problems quickly with plugins and hooks into the existing WordPress ecosphere of code. Drupal and Joomla are similarly, we could do another webinar about the security of CMSs, but because WordPress has such a high market share, that makes it a larger target for hacking. But we have ways to harden our sites so that is less possible.
And as long as you stay up to date on all the security releases and you don't just think that once you have a website created, it's good to go, then that greatly improves the security of it.
Yep. That goes back to the oil changes and the checkups.
Adam, do you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. How does Hubspot figure into all of this? That's basically what I'm looking at right now, is pulling my entire website off of WordPress because it was essentially hard-coded in 2007, 2008, meaning we are having to bring in external vendors to do any updates because of the code on the back end. So we're doing away with all that and likely going towards HubSpot. How does that fit into everything?
I don't know if HubSpot is technically considered a CMS on that long scrolling list that I showed, since it is I guess it's a CRM. I know that you can set up content pages and forms and get everything running on there. They do have there's platform specific code called Hubble, I believe. We are actually meeting with a client of ours on Friday to discuss this potential solution. Some of the stuff they've got that's custom won't translate, so we'll have to figure out how that works, how to either fit it into HubSpot or have a separate area for a particular, I think it's an API integration with something that HubSpot isn't ready for yet. I've never used it for a website, so that's about all I can surmise. But it sounds like a fun project.
I haven't used it strictly as a website, and definitely as like landing pages and stuff along those lines. Otherwise, integrations in with a WordPress website, but not HubSpot as the entire website.
Sounds cool, especially if you're already paying for their, it sounds like it's a CRM as a CMS as a service.
I think that's the bleed over. So the same thing is kind of true with NetSuite as well. We have several customers that have migrated their production sites to NetSuite and then branch out from there to other more traditional CMS platforms, whether that's WordPress or something else, to shore up all the gaps. But they leave in the NetSuite case, they leave the heavy lifting for the e-commerce part in NetSuite and do everything else externally. And the HubSpot side kind of gets closer to 50-50 from what I've experienced with now, where they're doing the things that they want HubSpot to capture all in HubSpot, and then everything else is external. But it got a lot closer to 50-50, but not as the core thing. My experience with it and stuff that we've done is, if everything you want out of your website works and you can do it in one of those platforms that are more closed, I guess would be the only way I could describe it, then you're good. But if you can't, then that's kind of where the deal breaker is. If you have a lot of customizations that you want to bring forward, or a lot of things that aren't easily done within the HubSpot interface to say, I want this here, this here, this here, and it's okay, then you're going to have a bad time. So you'll end up being in the same boat that you were in previously with the site that someone coded for you, because WordPress started out as a completely open platform and it was turned into a closed one by the development efforts that had gone on. And you're starting with one that's more closed and hoping that it's going to suit all your needs and then go from that. The actual question I had was, when we work with customers, and obviously we have a relationship with Earthling, and you guys kind of know what we do, obviously, and we know what you do, but we're asked about web stuff a lot. And
that's because IT does everything.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Like, well, we haven't had our web stuff done, and we didn't talk to the guy for 2 years, and we're not going to pay the money to fix it. And what can you guys do for us? I'm like, but the real thing with that is, and that's actually the real question is, when we're talking about the different platforms, and I'm most familiar with WordPress, it's one I've been using since it was less than 1.0 release. But when you're talking about the actual total cost of ownership, that's, I think, in my experience, what people really fall down on when they're trying to plan out what the site's going to be, what the actual cost to them, not just the project cost to get it done correctly, but what they should be expecting to have to put into the system in year 1 and year 2, and what refreshes they need to do, what the actual care and feeding of it is. And, what is your experience with some of the other platforms in comparison? Say using the WordPress as a benchmark for the flat line of it, is Drupal less resource intensive or more? Is Joomla less or more? I know both of those platforms have a different approach to how they, architect things and their focus, versus being open or more secure or less or whatever. But, is there a better one that would help contain costs or require less, care and feeding?
That's a great question. I do know from experience that Drupal is not the easiest one to update. There's no one-click button. It's basically copying the new code and pasting over your existing code, and nobody that doesn't sound like fun because everything could go wrong. Which is why we do it on stage and take backups. Craft, I would say, probably has a similar level of a similar level of security update releases. Definitely more minor version releases, sometimes daily over the course of months. But updating that is pretty straightforward through a composer file. For total hands off, if someone just doesn't want to deal with ongoing maintenance, that's where you get to the leased car analogy with the CMS as a service with Wix or Squarespace, because your monthly fee covers hosting, covers your domain name registration and renewal, and covers the security of the platform that you're on with all the other websites. And that starts pretty low, but it can get 30, 40, $50 a month, which over however long you want to let a website live over the course of 3 to 5 years is kind of spendy, considering the cost of hosting a WordPress site. And now WordPress hosts have automated updates and nightly backups, stuff that we at Earthling used to do manually. So that cuts the cost down quite a bit. I don't know if Joomla can be automatically updated. My experience with Joomla and Drupal are low. Did that answer enough, TJ?
Yeah. I mean, that gives some good ideas. And that's something that we, like I said, when we get those references, a lot of times it's organizations that, we say we, try to refer them out to, like you guys to do that and get them a real quote of what it would cost to do it. But many times we're getting that conversation at the point of it's already catastrophe. And then they're very, very cost averse, even in that situation. So when you look at something, like you mentioned a Squarespace or a Wix where everything is contained and it just becomes an operating expense versus, more of a CapEx thing where you do a big project and it's done every 2 years. Right. They still look at that and go, well, it's going to be like $50 a month. I don't want to pay $50 a month. I was like, well, so it's going to cost you $5,000 every couple of years. What would you rather do? And then you're stuck with something that isn't being maintained in the way, because you still have to maintain that. If somebody does a brand new nice website for you, work has to still go into it at some point to do that, unless you're working with a company that is going to do those things for you. Right. There's in that scenario, it's what I've run into with customers and having conversations about your website is no different than any other computer system you might have. And setting better expectations. A lot of people just think it's there and it doesn't need any care at all. It just, you put a website up, it's done. It's not that hard. Anybody can do that. And getting past those barriers to there is cost associated with it to do it right and do it well. Especially in today's kind of automated attack environment where everything is being constantly hammered. And if you're off by a few days on a 0 day, for WordPress or a theme or something, you're going to be likely serving ads or something crazy, by the end of the week if you're not looking at it. That's, I mean, I said that's my, if you went looking for feedback or something to help with stuff, more information and helping, like when I'm talking to customers, like what those cost-effective things are, what the expectation should actually be. Because honestly, it's web design stuff has never been anything I've been involved in. I'm more back-end stuff and making the rocket go, not making it look pretty. But, I have no concept of what the actual costs should be, to do it right and do it well, over the long haul. Is that something you guys, when you're working with your longer term customers, do you have an actual plan? Like when we work with you, we have contracts for durations of time to do services, and we're responsible that entire duration. Is that something that you also do when you're working on these projects? It's not just like you did the project and it's done, but you also have a term of work on that.
Yeah, we strongly encourage when the project is over to we get into an ongoing support contract, and we can estimate based on obviously historical data of annual fees for plugins and for labor, and how often WordPress or Drupal or Joomla drops a security update, and what to budget for. Yeah, we would
give somebody.
We wouldn't just send our websites off into the world without being around to care for them, because what we don't want is in a year someone to come back and say, we got hacked, you built our site, you fix it. Which we would be happy to do, but it's just easier to maintain it than it is to replace your seized engine because you ran out of oil.
Well, I have another question, Becky, and it kind of gets to Adam's question. And I've seen this happen before. If, for example, you switch platforms, what's the content migration situation look like? And is that something to take into consideration?
Yeah, so we've had a couple projects. I think the last one was 2 WordPress. So I'm thinking of immunization evidence.
I believe one of them came from Expression Engine that I put into Craft.
Oh yes, that was Filene.
Yeah. That was a bit painful, but it was doable.
Yeah. So we kind of have to figure out, so how much content do you have? Do you have someone that is able to copy and paste? And is that the better route? Or do we build a migration tool? And I think Luke that's the one we worked on. Yeah.
So I built a script that would migrate all the content into the new platform. I think there's a blogging platform called Ghost, which I was able to migrate into WordPress, but it only worked for the post type posts, so the blog posts. But that was like super hacky and it took me forever. And so it was like, it's always a question of, will it take how much effort versus the reward, obviously. And do you want to copy and paste, or do you want to write a program to do the migration? Yeah, which I think depends on how much content you have. So the more content you have, the more it makes sense to write a script that will actually do the migration for you. Whereas if you only have 10 pages of content, well, you might as well just do a copy and paste into the new system at that point.
What about from WordPress to WordPress? If, for example, Adam or somebody else that had a WordPress site that wasn't working for them, but they redeveloped, is that a straightforward process? Is that one of the benefits of staying with a similar?
WordPress exports pages and posts, which is they're all posts, but they're different content types, in an XML file. So the trouble comes from the page builder that's being used on the current site. For example, Divi, WP Bakery Builder, I don't know, I think Beaver Builder too. They're basically all putting in a bunch of shortcodes into the content area, which you don't see, but it makes it look nice on the front end. And that's how you get all your rows and columns and module types on the back end. But when you look at that as raw data, it's tons of extra stuff that you don't need or don't want. And at that point, if you don't use the same page builder, which I'm assuming a page builder in 2007, either didn't exist or doesn't exist. That would be that's where the research would need to go to make sure that an automated migration would make sense.
And sometimes I feel like you want to improve the system, so you may have everything just in as pages, whereas it could get broken out into like employees and reports and different custom post types. So you may want to not just, have it be more organized in as far as entering the content in the back end instead of just creating pages and all pages are the same.
Is that helpful, Adam? Okay. Claudette, what's your experience with CMSs? Have you worked on any of these or had any?
Yeah, I've looked at it mostly like, across different industries, the trends of like how certain CMSs are adapted. Of course, WordPress is the most popular one, but where I am most interested in trying to get more familiar with is more the cloud computing portion of it, like, how AWS is coming on board, how some other ways. And I think when Adam was talking about HubSpot, I mean, yes, they're known for CRM, but for them to now come on with a CMS all-encompassing tool, it becomes much more powerful. And then the other side of it, they also have chatbots, and chatbots are very much relative. And of course, when you're building your CMS and you're having to do all these APIs, that's a lot to balance. But when one company like HubSpot or AWS has it all there, it's all accessible and it's one-stop shop, it really does build operational efficiency, especially for the marketers or whoever's interfacing with it. And I think it just makes you more agile. So I think if there's a problem I'm seeing, it's not so much directly for me personally, but the thing that I see where we would want to find a solution for a business going through some digital transformation right now is that they would have to gear up to some kind of level, right? And there's such an array. So I think one of the questions TJ is asking is really quite, a point to take is the pricing. How much can you afford at that point? And I think it's getting much more affordable with everything now, CMS, CRM, and all those tools. So I'm just observing and still studying it all. And I think for marketers like myself, we're all trying to absorb it and transition, in a way that's efficient and cost sensitive. So I think the back end, is the understanding of what you're going to lose with content when you do migrate, and how much are you starting all over. And I think there is one thing I haven't quite understood is how much that affects when you're producing e-com, when you have e-commerce on your site, when you're actually, selling your products and your goods on there. So.
Does HubSpot offer e-commerce? We do. That's a whole nother webinar, so we didn't.
Yeah.
CMSs, but I think I'm bringing that up because I forgot to mention it.
Well, I think we might see Shopify starting to almost try to get into the CMS space, because they likewise, the more they can provide an ecosystem of services, the more intriguing that will be. I mean, Shopify has just exploded, but that's more because of market share, not because of an advancement of services. Just more people are wanting to do e-commerce. And we at Earthling, we service e-commerce, and Luke has the most experience with this. I think it's Magento, and it's a open source, very complex platform, but it's seeing a lot of competition now from Shopify just because of all of those factors that you mentioned, Claudette. And we're having to navigate that as service providers for Magento, and recognizing there are still some strengths to a dedicated system and not a one-stop shop, because there's always a drawback, and they're very difficult to anticipate because they're specific to the client and to the client's needs and to the user base. I can imagine a HubSpot CMS solution being beautiful for simple content and not a very complex integration with other systems outside of like digital marketing systems. But then if you're looking to do other types of integration or functionality, I'm guessing that's where you're going to come up against a wall that almost may put you at a disadvantage.
Yeah, just share some insight into what I'm seeing through this vetting out process. Is you, Aaron, you kind of hit it on the head. Our e-commerce side is run in Magento, and then right now the non-e-commerce side, if you will, is all in a WordPress site. And like I mentioned earlier, just through the headaches and everything of trying to keep it updated, the non-e-commerce site is what we are likely going to move forward with HubSpot for a lot of the reasons that like Claudette mentioned, the all-inclusiveness, the efficient, it will really open up my team to be a lot more agile and do a lot more innovative marketing activities than being a lot more reactive, especially when it comes to like website changes and things. And one really nice integration that we're able to do is integrate the HubSpot with Magento so into the CRM module hub of HubSpot. So we're able to get that customer holistic view from purchase, and then we can create automations from there to increase the UX of the customer. So that's kind of what that's my pie in the sky. That's what I'm shooting for, but that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that's why obviously the client that we mentioned earlier is coming to us, because we right now service pretty intensively HubSpot integrations for WordPress for that client. But I think they're looking at how can we kind of make this easier for us and take better advantage of what they already are paying for their HubSpot subscription, which will, I assume, go up. But, when you're then having a service on top of that, another system, I think that's definitely a driver and something we're going to be learning a lot more about. Obviously, there's always a new car on the lot, so to speak. And we have to learn the tricks of the trade. But I would say, in my experience, just as a takeaway, that if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Some of that you can live with, but it's very tempting for especially a HubSpot type organization, because they are so good at their marketing, to dangle some things. And so I would just encourage, and I'm sure it sounds like you've already been pretty a lot of discernment in the process, and we'll be looking into that as well.
It does sound like I come from a group of marketers that's sold dolls from Middleton, and that sounds like something that they would have just loved to be able to not wait 3 days to get a text changed on a website, and B, direct market to every single individual customer. And they would have loved that solution. So I'm sure your team will enjoy it, Adam.
Well, I think that's kind of an advantage that HubSpot and NetSuite have, because they're coming from a non-web forte. I mean, that's not the angle they're coming from. They're not creating a CRM platform or a sales platform or marketing platform on top of the website stuff they already did. They're adding that stuff to that platform. Be like if Salesforce decided they're going to do websites, and integrates. I mean, it's the same thing. They're coming from a platform that already has all that stuff done and adding in these things. And I would guess they're probably seeing the same thing that common sense probably would tell you as well, that many customers don't need a feature set that's this big. They need a feature set this big to be happy and be functional. And maybe they can give up one or two little things, but they're still going to be totally happy with the result. And their core driver was the other stuff, was the backend stuff that the platforms already do. So they're, could see a surge in their popularity compared to building something out and then having to shoehorn in, the plugins to get everything else to work and get WooCommerce to work and get all these other things to try to make it go, and then have to maintain all that. One of the things that, and this is less, I think I have some relation to the business side of business, but just in a general sense, in the climate that we're starting to see in, late 2019, 2020, I think as we go in the future with regards to content and ownership and copyright and all those pieces, when you're looking at the platforms that you're using and how to deal with knowing the content that's going on the sites is legal and how you respond to those kind of things and what potentially legislation might come down the pipe. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the DMCA is not long for this earth. It's going to have to get dramatically changed at some point. Things are just coming to a head with various platforms taking everything down and so much abuse of it, on all sides of the spectrum. It's not a far cry to think that people are just going to start mass litigating against just general websites and organizational websites. You used my image and you didn't pay for it, and filing those things. Is that something when you're looking at these platforms? Is there ways that like sourcing content and how you build out content? Do you look at all original content when you're, do you have photographers and things like that? You're redoing everything from scratch, or how do you look at that as an organization when you're working with customers to maintain that legality or future proofing that?
For the most part, we do. No, not for the most part. We use either royalty-free images or I can't remember the subscription service, but images that are paid for. In a couple of instances, our clients were lucky enough to have both a photographer and a videographer, and we're able to take specific pictures for that project, which obviously turned out much better than picking one off of the internet. Photography is expensive, so I think most people would lean toward the Unsplash or whatever the coupon paid iStock. Thank you. As far as text, and as far as I know, that has all been original or Latin. So we start with the lorem ipsum and we end with the English. But I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if Earthling would be held accountable for anybody's site that we built that has content that isn't theirs.
I don't think you would necessarily be, unless you put it there. That might be their contention, but it's looking at this stuff like, where is this going to go, and how do you protect yourself from that, and then how do you do the right thing with the content you're building out? It's a strange time that we're kind of living in with this stuff, and how do you do that, and to what Claudette was kind of talking about a little about that a full stack solution. What do you do when they change the rules? Our terms and conditions changed. Your choice is to either click yes and agree to them or go away, and because that's what you get locked into with a full solution, right? Is you have to agree, and if you don't, you're moving out, or you're losing something, or they're going to do something different, and that in and of itself can potentially be a huge fear, because how many people actually read the full. The
Oh, and the EULA.
anything.
Well, I think the inverse is also a problem as well, TJ, which is what if, how nimble are these systems? So they're, what's the rate of innovation on a system that's a full stack versus rate of innovation when you're doing sort of a collection? And if it takes them a while to make a transition because it's going to have such, downline impact, and you're missing out on an opportunity to implement some kind of really new cool feature, that's another consideration to take. And I think that's related to what you're saying, because it again, it's like you're in their boat. And if they say you need to all get on this side of the boat, you have to do it. And if another boat, has some other, sorry for the analogies, they're just so tempting, has another great way of, getting across the lake, you don't get it. You don't get to have that. So I think there's a lot more discussion to have, and I think we have a webinar idea coming up, because there's another full solution one that just came. It starts with a K. What is it? What did I tell you guys? Cabana, right? What is it? Cabot. Do you know what it is?
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah.
I think the one you were gonna say was the most expensive one that's probably out there right now. But
I can't remember. I can look it up.
Kentico?
That sounds very
Or is it-
close.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Well,
Canvas or something. There was another one out there. I don't.
Well, here's what I'll do. I'll look it up. We always do a follow-up email, and so I'll send it out in that. And
Kentico is a CMS.
yeah, that's it.
Kentico.
Yeah, when she said K, that's what I thought she meant, the Kentico one. That was the only one I knew of with a K.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a full service, also digital marketing, as far as I understand. Anyway, I'll look it up. I'll make sure it's in our follow-up message. We have done a pretty good job. You went a little actually over because it was a good conversation. But before we leave, I want to check and see if there's any questions. Okay, we're good there. 2, to point out in the chat, if you want to take advantage, you can reach out again for another review of your website with our CMS team. You're welcome to do that. We'd love to have these conversations a little more specific to what your needs are. And finally, thank you so much for coming today. And I'll hand it over to Becky and Luke to say goodbye, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thanks for taking time out of your day. I know it's real hard to be on Zoom as often as I'm sure we all are. I really like doing these. They take me a long time to prepare for, even though it only took me 10 minutes to go through, but it's a lot of fun to hear what other people are doing. And especially since March, I've been in this room for 7 months. No, I actually do go out into the kitchen. It's good to see new faces and familiar faces. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was good.
Becky, it was great. Your analogy with the car shopping. I really thought that was a really clever approach.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was nice meeting everyone. Hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you.
Good day. Yep.
Bye, TJ. Thank you.